Her fist was already moving before the instructor finished speaking. I did not have time to think. I only had time to react. My name is Weiss Calder. I was the only human cadet in my training group at the Auriga Combat Institute, a school built to train security officers for stations across many different worlds. Everyone else in my class was taller than me, heavier than me, and stronger than me. Some of them could bend metal bars with their bare hands. I could not do any of that. Before I joined the institute, I was just a young man who ran long-distance races and wrestled in school for 2 years. That was all the training I had. It did not seem like much next to cadets who were born for combat. The cadet who attacked me was named Asa. She belonged to a species called the Drevak, a people built for close, heavy fighting. Their bones were dense. Their muscles moved fast. They grew up in gravity stronger than anything on Earth, which made their bodies naturally powerful. From the very first day of training, Asa did not like me. She called humans soft. She said we only survived in the galaxy because of luck, not because we were actually strong. I never argued back. I did not see the point. I figured time would either prove her right or prove her wrong, and nothing I said was going to change that. That morning we were supposed to have a supervised sparring match. The instructor, a calm and serious officer named Vel, was still explaining the safety rules. No strikes to the neck, no twisting attacks on the joints. First person to land a clean hit or force a surrender would win the round. Asa did not wait for him to finish. She crossed the mat in less than a second and threw a hard punch straight at my jaw. It was fast. It was heavy. If it had landed, it would have done real damage. I did not decide what to do next. My body simply did what years of wrestling had trained it to do without asking my permission. I slipped my head to the side, letting the punch pass just beside my ear. At the same moment, my hand closed around her wrist. I used the force of her own swinging arm, the speed she had built up rushing toward me, and turned it against the angle of her joint. I felt something shift under my hand. She cried out and dropped down onto one knee. The whole training room went completely silent. The entire exchange took 4 seconds. I know this because later that day, Instructor Vel sat with me and played the footage back frame by frame. 4 seconds from her first punch to the end of the match. I had barely even finished planting my back foot on the mat. I need to be honest about something. I did not feel proud when it happened. My hands were shaking harder than hers were. I had never hurt someone like that before, not on purpose and not by accident either. That whole night, I kept replaying it in my head, wondering if there was a way I could have stopped her without hurting her at all. I wondered if I had done something wrong, even though everyone around me kept telling me I had done exactly what training was meant to prepare me for. Instructor Vel did not agree that I had done anything wrong. He was part of an older species called the HFY, a people with a long history in combat training, and they valued control above almost anything else. Instead of giving me a warning, he called me into his office the next morning and asked me a single question. He asked if I had aimed for her wrist on purpose. I told him the truth. I had not aimed for anything specific. My body had simply found the weakest point in the position on its own, the same way it had during every wrestling match I had ever won or lost back home. He nodded slowly when I said this, like my answer confirmed something he already suspected. He explained that most cadets, when they are attacked without warning, respond by using everything they have. He reminded me that Asa outweighed me by almost 100 pounds and could lift objects that would crush most people. If I had tried to match her raw strength with my own raw strength, I would have been the one lying in the medical bay instead of her. Instead, my training had given her just enough force to stop the attack, and nothing more than that. He told me this was not luck. It was the result of a system built around the idea that my body would never be the strongest one in the room, which meant it had learned to rely on something other than strength from the very beginning. He told me something else that stayed with me long after that conversation ended. He said that most of the powerful species trained at the Institute grew up trusting their size and their raw force. Their bodies were naturally strong enough to end most fights in a single motion, so their combat training never had a real reason to focus on precision. Humans, he said, We're one of the only species whose entire fighting style assumed the other person would usually be bigger and stronger. Every technique we learned, from wrist locks to throws to holds, was built around one simple idea. If you cannot overpower someone, you have to outthink them, using your hands in the middle of the moment without any time to plan ahead. 3 days later, Asa came to find me. Her wrist was wrapped in a brace, and the swelling had gone down quite a bit by then. I expected her to be angry. Instead, she stood quietly in the doorway of my room for a long moment before she said anything at all. She told me she had been hit harder than that before, many times, by training machines and even by her own brothers growing up. But she said she had never experienced someone stopping at exactly the right point and not one bit further. She explained that her own people were never trained that way. Their whole approach to combat was built around ending a fight completely, as fast and as fully as possible. There was no tradition among her people of holding something back on purpose. I told her I never meant to hurt her, that it had simply been reflex, something my body did without asking me first. She looked at me in a way I did not fully understand at the time, somewhere between respect and disbelief. She said that was the part that unsettled her most. Not that I had hurt her, but that I had not needed to try very hard to do it. After her brace came off, she asked me to teach her the same wrist lock I had used against her. It felt strange at first, showing someone the exact move that had caused her injury, but she said she wanted to learn it for that very reason. She said a fighter who could end a threat in 4 seconds using almost no force at all was someone worth learning from, even if the lesson began with her own injury. I agreed to teach her, and from that point on, something between us changed. We began sparring together twice a week for the rest of the training term. She never came at me with full force again, not because she was afraid, but because she had started to respect the kind of fighting I represented. By the middle of the term, she had started teaching me things too. She showed me how to absorb a heavy strike from someone like her without losing my footing, how to redirect force instead of standing directly against it, and how to read the small signs in a much larger opponent's stance before they moved. In return, I kept teaching her the kind of technique that came naturally to me but felt completely foreign to her. I showed her how to fold a joint using an angle rather than raw power, how timing mattered more than muscle, and how a small shift in position could make someone twice her size lose their balance completely. She picked it up faster than I expected. She told me once that learning to fight this way felt like learning an entirely new language, one built on patience and precision instead of overwhelming force. By the end of the term, something had shifted in how the rest of the class saw me too. At first, most of my classmates had assumed I was simply lucky, or that Asa had underestimated me because she was reckless. But after weeks of watching me spar with cadets twice my size, using the same calm, controlled technique every single time, they started to understand that what happened that first day was not an accident. It was the result of training that had shaped my instincts long before I ever set foot in that room. Instructor Vell told me near the end of the course that he had trained hundreds of cadets from dozens of species over the years, but very few of them had shown the kind of instinctive control I had shown that day. He said most fighters needed years of discipline to learn how to hold back exactly the right amount of force in the middle of real danger. My body had done it automatically, on the very first try, because the assumption behind human training was built differently from the start. Looking back now, I do not think about that day as a fight I won. I think about it as the moment everyone around me, including myself, understood something new about how a person can be strong without ever needing to overpower anyone. Asa and I became close friends after that term ended, closer than either of us expected when we first met. She still reminds me sometimes that I never even had to try, and I still remind her that neither did she, once she finally understood how to fight the way I did. That is the real lesson I carried out of that training room. Strength is not always about how much force a person can use. Sometimes it is about knowing exactly how much force is needed and having the discipline to stop there, even when your body could easily give much more.